In this video, we're going to discuss a bunch of other scales that are not major, minor, or the modes. Some might call them fabricated scales. The first one we're going to look at is called the whole tone scale. It's a scale of whole steps. So C, D, E would be the beginning of a major scale. But here's where we're going to depart. In a major scale, we'd progress to F. But we're going to keep going with whole tones, whole steps. So E to F sharp, then F sharp to G sharp, then G sharp to A sharp. And now, if we go up a whole step, we're, at least enharmonically, we're going to be back to C. And the sound of the whole tone scale is one of ambiguity because there is no half steps that kind of give context to the whole steps. Here's the C whole tone scale. Sometimes it's used to give sort of a dreamy, at least in a stereotypical sense, a dream-like state. So that's the whole tone scale. Of course, you could build a whole tone scale on notes other than C. Let's take this one up a half step to D flat. So we're going to start on D flat, up a whole tone to E flat, up a whole tone to F, up a whole tone to G, to A, to B natural, and then enharmonically up to D flat. So there's our whole tone scale. You'll notice it uses one less note than a major scale. If we take that up another half step to D, we're back to the same notes that we had when we started on C. For this reason, Olivier Messiaen, a 20th century French composer, called this scale one of his modes of limited transposition. In other words, you can only transpose it so many times before you start repeating the same sets of notes. So there's only two whole tone scales, the one on C and the one on D flat. Basically, you're just starting on different notes. All right, we're going to go on to also another of Olivier Messiaen's modes of limited transposition, but also another fabricated scale that can be quite useful in contemporary writing, at least, and that's called the diminished scale. Let's start on D, and the pattern for diminished scale is whole step, half step, whole step, half step. So we're going to start with a whole step, D to E, right? Whole step. Then we're going to go to a half step, E to F, half step. Then whole step, then half step, A flat, then whole step, B flat, then half step, let's call this B natural, and then whole step, C sharp, then half step, D, and we're back to where we started, right? So this is the D diminished scale. It's also called the octatonic scale because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 notes before you repeat, whereas in the major scale there would be 7. So octatonic or diminished scale. Let's hear the sound of this. Another reason that it's called the diminished scale, let me get rid of these red circles. And I'm also going to erase these half-step, whole-step markings. Another reason it's called the diminished scale is that every other note forms a diminished chord. So in this scale, you're actually, if you think of chords as every other note in a scale, in a major scale, that's true with triads. All right, so if we take every other note, we have D, F, A flat, B. And that's a D diminished 7 chord. Then if we take every other note in between that, we have E, G, B flat. Well, this would be a D flat enharmonically, but that would be an E diminished 7, fully diminished 7 chord. So it's also called the diminished scale. And we could build a diminished scale on a different note. Like we took it up to E and started whole step, half step. We'd get different notes. Notice that the way I started this one was with a whole step. Okay, there's another way to go, and that's to start with a half step. So we could start with D and go up a half step to E flat, then my whole step to F, then my half step to G flat, whole step to A flat, half step to A natural, whole step to B natural, half step to C, whole step to D. So that's a different set of notes. Let me play this one. Still a diminished scale. We still end up getting these D, F, A flat, B there. Here it's E flat, G flat, This one would be enharmonically, I guess, B double flat and then D double flat, but it's still a diminished chord that every other note forms. All right, so that's the diminished scale or the octatonic scale, and again, you could start whole step, half step, or you could start half step, whole step. There are only a certain number of transpositions of that one. All right, the next one I'm going to look at is actually two of them, pentatonic major and pentatonic minor. Pentatonic major would be do, re, mi, so, la, and then back up to do. So think of the syllables, do, re, mi, so, la, do. Right. I'm not sure if I'm in the right key here, but do, re, mi, so, la, do. Right? So that's the major pentatonic. The minor pentatonic, let's just erase all this. The minor pentatonic, I'm going to start on F again since that was an F major pentatonic. The minor pentatonic is do, me, fa, so, le, do. So again, it only is a 5-note scale, but it's a different 5 notes. So here's the minor. Might sound familiar to you because there's one subtle difference between the minor pentatonic and the blues scale, and that subtle difference is simply that we're going to add a sharp 4. So in this scale, we'd add right here a B natural, a sharp 4, and then we'd have so just adding sharp 4 to a minor pentatonic creates the blues scale. And those are the scales I wanted to present in this video. The whole tone, which is a scale built in whole steps, the diminished scale, which can either go whole step, half step, whole step, half step, or half step, whole step, half step, whole step, all the way up an octave, or the major pentatonic, which is do, re, mi, so, la, the first, second, third, fifth, and sixth scale degrees of a major scale, or the do, me, fa, so, te, which would be the first, third, fourth, fifth, and seventh scale degrees of a pure minor scale. And then the blues scale is simply the minor pentatonic, but you add sharp 4. I guess the syllable will be phi there. Okay, and those are the fabricated scales.